if we try to determine the object, the analysis and historical explanation of which we are attempting, it cannot be in the form of a conceptual definition, but at least in the beginning only a provisional description of what is here meant by the spirit of capitalism. Such a description is, however, indispensable in order clearly to understand the object of the investigation. For this purpose, we turn to a document of that spirit, which contains what we are looking for in almost classical purity, and at the same time has the advantage of being free from all direct relationship to religion, being thus, for our purposes, free of preconceptions. Remember that time is money. He that can earn 10 shillings a day by his labor and goes abroad or sits idle 1/2 of that day, though he spends but 6 pence during his diversion or idleness, ought not to reckon that the only expense. He has really spent, or rather thrown away, 5 shillings besides. Remember that credit is money. If a man lets his money lie in my hands after it is due, he gives me the interest, or so much as I can make of it during that time. This amounts to a considerable sum where a man has good and large credit and makes good use of it. Remember that money is of the prolific generating nature. Money can beget money, and its offspring can beget more, and so on. 5 shillings turned is 6, turned again is 7, and 3 and so on till it becomes 100 pounds. The more there is of it, the more it produces every turning, so that the profits rise quicker and quicker. He that kills a breeding sow destroys all her offspring to the 1000th generation. He that murders a crown destroys all that it might have produced, even scores of pounds. Remember this saying: the good paymaster is lord of another man's purse. He that is known to pay punctually and exactly to the time he promises may at any time and on any occasion raise all the money his friends can spare. This is sometimes of great use. After industry and frugality, nothing contributes more to the raising of a young man in the world than punctuality and justice in all his dealings. Therefore, never keep borrowed money an hour beyond the time you promised, lest a disappointment shut up your friend's purse forever. The most trifling actions that affect a man's credit are to be regarded. The sound of your hammer at 5 in the morning or 8 at night, heard by a creditor, makes him easy 6 months longer. But if he sees you at a billiard table or hears your voice at a tavern, when you should be at work, he sends for his money the next day, demands it, before he can receive it in a lump. It shows, besides, that you are mindful of what you owe. It makes you appear a careful as well as an honest man, and that still increases your credit. Beware of thinking all your own that you possess, and of living accordingly. It is a mistake that many people who have credit fall into. To prevent this, keep an exact account for some time both of your expenses and your income. If you take the pains at first to mention particulars, it will have this good effect. You will discover how wonderfully small trifling expenses mount up to large sums, and will discern what might have been, and may for the future be saved without occasioning any great inconvenience. For £6 a year you may have the use of £100, provided you are a man of known prudence and honesty. He that spends a groat a day idly spends idly above £6 a year, which is the price for the use of £100. He that wastes idly a groat's worth of his time per day, one day with another, wastes the privilege of using £100 each day. He that idly loses 5 shillings worth of time, loses 5 shillings, and might as prudently throw 5 shillings into the sea. He that loses 5 shillings not only loses that sum, but all the advantage that might be made by turning it in dealing, which by the time that a young man becomes old, will amount to a considerable sum of money. It is Benjamin Franklin who preaches to us in these sentences, the same which Ferdinand Kernberger satirizes in his clever and malicious picture of American culture, as the supposed confession of faith of the Yankee. That it is the spirit of capitalism which here speaks in characteristic fashion, no one will doubt, however little we may wish to claim that everything which could be understood as pertaining to that spirit is contained in it. Let us pause a moment to consider this passage, the philosophy of which Kernberger sums up in the words, "They make tallow out of cattle, and money out of men." The peculiarity of this philosophy of avarice appears to be the ideal of the honest man of recognized credit, and above all the idea of a duty of the individual toward the increase of his capital, which is assumed as an end in itself. Truly, what is here preached is not simply a means of making one's way in the world, but a peculiar ethic. The infraction of its rules is treated not as foolishness, but as forgetfulness of duty. That is the essence of the matter. It is not mere business astuteness. That sort of thing is common enough. It is an ethos. This is the quality which interests us. When Jacob Fugger, in speaking to a business associate who had retired, and who wanted to persuade him to do the same, since he had made enough money and should let others have a chance, rejected that as pusillanimity, and answered that he, Fugger, thought otherwise. He wanted to make money as long as he could. The spirit of this statement is evidently quite different from that of Franklin. What in the former case was an expression of commercial daring and a personal inclination morally neutral, in the latter takes on the character of an ethically colored maxim for the conduct of life. The concept spirit of capitalism is here used in this specific sense. It is the spirit of modern capitalism. For that we are here dealing only with Western European and American capitalism is obvious from the way in which the problem was stated. Capitalism existed in China, India, Babylon, in the classic world, and in the Middle Ages. But in all these cases, as we shall see, this particular ethos was lacking. Now, all Franklin's moral attitudes are colored with utilitarianism. Honesty is useful because it assures credit. So are punctuality, industry, frugality, and that is the reason they are virtues. A logical deduction from this would be that where, for instance, the appearance of honesty serves the same purpose, that would suffice, and an unnecessary surplus of this virtue would evidently appear to Franklin's eyes as unproductive waste. And as a matter of fact, the story in his autobiography of his conversion to those virtues, or the discussion of the value of a strict maintenance of the appearance of modesty, the assiduous belittlement of one's own deserts in order to gain general recognition later, confirms this impression. According to Franklin, those virtues, like all others, are only insofar virtues as they are actually useful to the individual, and the surrogate of mere appearance is always sufficient when it accomplishes the end in view. It is a conclusion which is inevitable for the strict utilitarianism. The impression of many Germans that the virtues professed by Americanism are pure hypocrisy seems to have been confirmed by this striking case. But in fact, the matter is not by any means so simple. Benjamin Franklin's own character, as it appears in the really unusual candidness of his autobiography, belies that suspicion. The circumstance that he ascribes his recognition of the utility of virtue to a divine revelation which was intended to lead him in the path of righteousness shows that something more than mere garnishing for purely egocentric motives is involved. In fact, the summum bonum of this ethic, the earning of more and more money combined with the strict avoidance of all spontaneous enjoyment of life, is above all completely devoid of any eudaimonistic, not to say hedonistic, admixture. It is thought of so purely as an end in itself that from the point of view of the happiness of, or utility to the single individual, it appears entirely transcendental and absolutely irrational. Man is dominated by the making of money, by acquisition as the ultimate purpose of his life. Economic acquisition is no longer subordinated to man as the means for the satisfaction of his material needs. This reversal of what we should call the natural relationship, so irrational from a naive point of view, is evidently as definitely a leading principle of capitalism as it is foreign to all peoples not under capitalistic influence. At the same time, it expresses a type of feeling which is closely connected with certain religious ideas. If we thus ask, why should money be made out of men? Benjamin Franklin himself, although he was a colorless deist, answers in his autobiography with a quotation from the Bible, which his strict Calvinistic father drummed into him again and again in his youth. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. Proverbs 22, verse 29. The earning of money within the modern economic order is, so long as it is done legally, the result and the expression of virtue and proficiency in a calling. And this virtue and proficiency are, as it is now not difficult to see, the real alpha and omega of Franklin's ethic, as expressed in the passages we have quoted, as well as in all his works, without exception.